Occasion, I locked my dog out of the house right now, so he's cooling his heels in the yard.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Teresa Ferguson. I'm the executive director of Austin Up, and Austin Up is a nonprofit that was formed as a result of the Mayor's Task Force on Aging back in 2014. And the Mayor's Task Force was formed after the 2010 census figures came back and said that Austin has one of the fastest growing populations of older adults in the nation. What a surprise, right? Because we're a college town. So Austin Up advocates for older adults, and we also advocate for older adults getting jobs, past 50. And so we host 1 or 2 presentations each month on different topics, whether it's updating your job search skills to make you more competitive, or if you're thinking about transitioning from a staff position to a contract position or owning your own business, we want you to be prepared for that as well. So this presentation is part of that series. Again, we're glad you're here. I'm going to introduce our main speaker, Laura Fowler. She's the managing partner of the Fowler Law Firm, and she has earned Best Lawyers designation from U.S. World and News Report's Martindale-Hubbell AV Lawyer and AV Woman Lawyer Preeminent. She also is the 2017 Greater Austin Asian Chamber of Commerce Member of the Year, the 2016 Greater Austin Black Chamber Diversity Champion, the 2016 Austin LGBT Chamber of Commerce Pride Champion, the Austin Club 2014 Member of the Year, and Williamson County Association of Realtors 2013 Member of the Year. She graduated from Baylor Law School in 1979. She began her career as a lieutenant junior grade in the U.S. Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps aboard the warship USS Guadalcanal. But her greatest calling, she says, is to help her clients design ways to never see the inside of a courtroom. Laura, take it away.
Hey, if I could just be all this stuff that Teresa makes up about me, I would love something. But thank you. And I'm not going to waste any more time telling you about me. I do want to introduce my Mr. Belt here. Mr. Belt, wave your hand. And I asked Mr. Belt to join me today because he is the chief of the Fowler Law Firm has 14 attorneys. We are in discrete practice areas. A lot of what I do is trial work related to commercial. The happy part is somebody who says, hey, Laura, I want to form a business entity. That's kind of fun. And I told every last one of them that called me in the last 10 days to do this, we need to go to Teresa's party and you will learn everything in a more fun and colorful format than what you have to listen to if I'm yapping on the Zoom with them privately. And it costs less too, right? This is free, isn't it, Teresa? What a deal. All right. But Mr. Belt is a very skilled, in addition to having general business skills that are considerable, all of his career, almost 50 years licensed, he also practices daily in probate. And a lot of people think probate is granny died and left you the jewels and your sibling ran off with them. And that's certainly some of it. But more of it is people who die, they have a business where land or inventory are the largest item in their estate, and they make no efforts either to transition the business or to transition ownership in an orderly way. And we see many, and Mr. Belt on the estate planning side of this helps people to avoid, the time to figure out how to make payroll this Friday is not because Daddy just died over at Seton, over at the hospital 2 days ago, and he didn't ever give anybody a power of attorney to the bank accounts. And with these smaller businesses, that regularly happens. Or something as simple as just not giving, you think you're invincible, you've started this business, and you never give anybody the codes. So we got the stuff this afternoon. If at the end of it, we're going to talk 45 minutes, no more. And then Teresa, how long do you want to leave open for Q&A? Mr. Belt not go as long as you want, but do we go on to another topic at 3?
Right, 15 or 20, yeah. Usually these presentations are just an hour. So that's a good question, Laura. Do you want people to ask questions in the chat box and review them throughout the presentation, or would you?
No, I'd like everybody to, you can send your question. Sometimes that's helpful to me because I'll address it as we're going along, but I want them asking a question to be only at the end.
Okay, great.
Because a lot of people ask questions that we get to it before it's over. So, but in any event, Mr. Belt is very skilled. Mr. Belt, if you'll turn off your mute there in case I gratuitously ask you a question. And we're going to roar right through this. This could be many hours, seriously, because this is substantive stuff. But if you'll just, and Teresa, didn't you say you're recording this or everybody's going to get a copy of it? The links are the key to it. And let me first say, this sounds like lawyer stuff, but this is practical. There's not a thing I'm telling you this afternoon, a problem that wasn't inspired by clients who, and you know, in Austin, people are so smart, not just well-educated, but smart, practical. And these are mistakes that surprise me because our very smart, very practical clients regularly make them. And they didn't need a law license or a lawyer like Mr. Belt to not make these mistakes. They just needed to get sensitized to the fact that these are the big mistakes that blow up your business. So we'll just start right along here. And now I'm in charge of jokes, but here's how Mr. Belt teaches people. This is really true. Mr. Belt had a client that didn't understand liability. And we have their permission to use that image. We're going to talk about copyright. They are happy. Mr. Belt, what's the name of your client? They gave us permission to brag about them.
Aeronautics of Austin. They're the hot air balloon people out of Round Rock.
Right, helium balloon people. And they needed some help with disclosures and informed consent. And Mr. Belt, instead of doing what ordinary lawyers do, which is sit down to his desk and print something on a piece of paper and send it to him, he got out there in the field and gave them learned discourse as they're going up for air. There's his long-suffering wife on the left. God bless you, Terry. Terry's trainings are memorable. So, okay, real quick now. See, we'll go back over all of this. I'm only telling you this to make you stay to the end. Don't be zooming off because this is good stuff. Okay, first thing I want to talk to you about, since the title of this today is, what is the title, Teresa? Anyway, going into business with family and friends, and it's targeting an older audience today. You know, this idea young people have that when you reach our age, and I don't mind telling you, I'm 67 and Mr. Belt can tell you how old he is if he wants to. We fall in love like everybody else. If anything, we're more vulnerable. In Texas, Texas is a common law marriage state. It's called informal marriage, but you need to be extraordinarily careful about this, because if you declare yourself married, have an intent to marry, and hold yourself out to be married, you're married in Texas, and there's not some 6-month waiting period or anything. If you don't believe me, you go read that statute there. It will take your breath away. And older citizens are as vulnerable to this as anybody else. So, okay. So,
Laura, I have a point.
Yes, sir.
And that is, a lot of times people get in trouble by cheating on health insurance from their employer, by declaring themselves married and insuring their spouse when they're not married. So lawyers look at the employment insurance to see if they've already held themselves out to be married. That's just a little thing to watch out for.
Yeah, that's a good point, because once you are declared as marriage, everything that occurs after the point you've made a declaration or the facts of holding yourself out plus intent between you becomes published. At that point, it's a lot more than getting a health care benefit. It's going to track your house, your assets, your securities, your 401k, those all. And why we're bringing this up today with business is simply this. If you form a business entity, there are ways to keep that business entity separate from your spouse. And we'll talk about that a little later, but you've got to, the thing today is not to tell you how to do all this. We're not going to tell you how to perform neurosurgery on yourself. You need to go get a lawyer to do that, but to get you sensitized so you don't make this mistake. Now, the second thing, we got some pictures there of family members who love, just because you love your young ones doesn't mean they have any business running your business with you. So you got to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Pay them money to do something? Yes. The O word, don't make them an owner until you're sure. You can fire an offspring just like anybody else. Texas is an at-will state. But if you say the O word, if you transfer them ownership, you cannot take that ownership away from them. You just can't. You know, you may end up paying your offspring, who by then hates you because you told them. How many of your children have ever said, Dad, Mom, you're right, I am just no good and I don't know how to do anything? After you sadly conclude that in your business, they're no good and they don't know how to do anything. So don't do that. All right. And last thing down there, the evil one, gambling. And there's a lot more about gambling than going to Las Vegas. Credit cards. It's easy enough if you have access to any of these electronic systems. The deed records. Often, if somebody is behind on their taxes, there will be IRS liens. There will be county ad valorem tax liens. There will be all kinds of liens that for nothing you can find. Don't ever let anybody into your business that has what appears to be a debt record. If they file for bankruptcy, that tells you, I mean, it happens. It's going to happen a lot in the weeks to months to come once we release these commercial mortgage suspensions and evictions. You're going to see a lot of that. But that's one thing. Feeling compassionate for people who are losing their home is one thing. Putting them into your business is another. And you got to gird your loins and hitch up your big boy pants for that one. Or, not to sound sexist, your big girl pants, right, Mr. Belt?
Yes.
Our big girl pants. I don't know.
I have something to share with our people about Verify, Laura, if you let me. One of the ways that you can verify the person that you're interested in, Mr. Google is one way. Just type into your Google search the name and see what comes up. Our law office has wonderful software for finding some things out, but here's a free one that I want to share with you. It's called fastfriends.com. And if you will look up it's fastpeople.com. If it's free, you know, you've seen stuff on the internet that says we look things up and it's free to you, but then they charge you to give it to you. So fastfriends.com or fastpeople.com is free. If you're interested in somebody, you don't have to tell them you're checking them out, just check them out.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Terry. And let me just say this. Now, obviously, in employment, and today is not the employment talk. That's a serious talk that you got to keep your wits about you. If you, and it's true whether you hire one half of one employee or 100 employees, there are a lot of federal and state laws that you have to meet. And I think, Teresa, y'all do a program on that, I believe. I mean, you know, for older people who may feel they are being discriminated against, we've done some excellent presentations on employment. But there's free association in this country. You don't have to form ownership relationships with people you don't want to. But the smarter path is just what Terry is saying. You keep your mouth shut, you check people out, and then you just don't make them an offer. And you don't want to make them an offer and then they say, yes, Terry, I will be your partner forever in your business selling bologna out of a food truck. And then you say, great. And then you go back to Terry's fastpeople.com and the LexisNexis search and the property search. You realize, oh my gosh, this person's a sexual predator, strangled his wife to death. And let me also say this before you express shock. Facebook is a very useful place to figure out if people run around half naked or display their intoxicated nature to the whole world. And, you know, In a small firm, one owner has a lot bigger profile than if you're IBM, because there are only a few people, and every one of those people who is an owner is the face of the company. So yeah, love but verify, whether they're your friends. And let me tell you, I cannot tell you how many times I have told our clients, before you get in bed, figuratively, with this person, well, they're also the ones they're already in bed with, if you know what I mean. I said, can you just please go to these? And I don't do it myself. Obviously I could do it myself, but they need to get in the habit of doing it themselves. And they call me up, things where you're not going to believe what my loved one has done. And because, you know, not paying your taxes, most people just don't sit around at the dinner table saying, oh yeah, I didn't pay my taxes and I've got 3 divorces under my belt and whatever, but it's all there. And you need to make, I mean, and I just say one last thing before we leave this. I hope most people are careful about a partner that they're beginning to consider a marriage with. But actually, and Terry, you speak up, because Terry does a lot of family law with high dollar people. And the family law part of it, if they don't have any minor children, that's just, it is what it is. But with,
And Laura, I do have something to add to that. People can put their estate into a trust, a family trust, that they're both the trustee and then you have a trustee to help you spend your money. But in reference to the picture up at the top left, that gentleman looks like a banker I used to represent, who, when he retired from his home and went to an assisted living, there are people in assisted living that want to meet you and help you. And so soon as he checked into this facility, he was confronted with an opportunity for true love, and she'd been working that facility pretty hard for a period of time and had a pretty good reputation about what she was doing. And so she was there to assist him. And if you put your assets into a family trust where other people can't get it, divorce lawyers, bankruptcy lawyers, etc., you can protect some of your assets.
Yeah. That, by the way, I should have put the names up there. On the right are Ryan O'Neill and Farrah Fawcett, and it's an open issue whether those two ever under Texas law got married. But the most valuable single asset she had was not her own image, but an Andy Warhol painting of her, which some people thought, like the almighty Bevo, that she gave it to Bevo. But Ryan O'Neill did not think she gave it to Bevo, and that thing was worth millions of dollars. Hell hath no fury like a trustee scorned. In this case, the trustees of the foundation of the University of Texas. That was a throat ripper. But then over there on the left, what Mr. Belt is referring to, that's Mr. Marshall, a Texas billionaire who later in life fell madly in love. Some of you who are a little older probably remember Anna Nicole Smith. He fell madly in love with Anna Nicole Smith and married her. And to the great chagrin of his stepson, a very skilled lawyer, because stepson had never talked daddy into putting that $1 billion estate into a trust. If he had, things would have been different. And then away they went for about 15 years. Half that ended up on her reality TV show. Yeah, well, anyway, enough about fancy rich people. Okay, you don't need a lawyer to get the law. You just need to type in some words, and these search engines now are so good. These links at the bottom, you can go read the law yourself. Legislators wrote these laws. Lawyers vet them to make sure they're legal, but reading law is something everyone is supposed to be able to do. Now, I just want to tell you this. We could talk a long time about somebody in the nursing home beating up grandma, or Domino, the temptress over at the, wasn't that her name, Terry? Domino? Dominique? Dominic?
I don't remember her name.
Yeah, well, that's a true.
Could have been Roxy.
But with elder law, I want you all to take note of this. Elderly person means anyone over 65. And if anyone over 65 gets taken advantage of because you gave somebody in your business a power of attorney, because someone in your business talked you at age 65 into giving up an interest in your business, everything that might have been a misdemeanor if whatever you gave them didn't have any value or whatever they took didn't have much value, ratchets up to a felony. And if you don't think we can get some people to give that stuff back to our clients in a hurry with that one, I've just handed you a bazooka. Well, bazookas aren't distributed anymore. Whatever, what is the successor to? Hey, that's a test question and you get a free consultation. What is the successor to the bazooka? Teresa told you I was a naval officer. I love bazookas, but you know, I'm old. All right, so look at this, ladies and gentlemen. If you think now is not the time because of COVID, I want you to look at these sales tax with the exception. This is very interesting. Oh, got one more here. The loser, San Marcos in Austin, which coincidentally hit, have huge student populations, which went back to wherever they came from. They're the biggest loser. I mean, to me, you can talk about how great everything is in a business journal, but where you find out, and there's no fooling around, is what amount of sales tax did you collect? And that's city by city. And look at that. Look at that. It's huge. I mean, Georgetown, Killeen, the winner is Pflugerville. Pflugerville collected 26% more sales tax during COVID than it did before. Why? Because of explosive growth. Who knows what it's going to be a year from now? Those figures might double, because this is what everybody did with some of the most oppressive and frightening conditions in our lifetime. So this is the time, if you're going to start a business, and there is not an area, with the possible exception of hospitality, which I think by June or July, we're going to be, by the third quarter, we're going to be turning cartwheels down Congress Avenue again. But most of these industries have done quite well. And these are broad brush. Anything that collects sales tax and remits back to the comptroller is reflected in these numbers. These numbers don't lie. So I think this is, you should take tremendous encouragement. I don't know about you, Teresa, but I'm going to Pflugerville, girl. That's where all the action is. Okay. Can you answer all of this? Now, the time to answer all of this is not over at the lawyer's office. It's when you start talking, which is long before the lawyers should be involved. What are you going to do? And half the time these people come in to see us. Terry's a lot more polite. You know, if you're going to do one of these deals and you got to unsort what you sorted, Terry's your man, not me, because I'm just blunt with, like, what were you thinking about to do these deals? They've already formed their LLC and they don't have a clue. All right. So here are all the things, and Teresa's going to send you this. It's all recorded. So you need to have a talk with your potential fellow owners. And just because you're married, don't you think for a minute that a business works the same way a marital estate does. One, in marital estate, you don't typically hire people. So in a marital estate, you do have assets, but if you don't get some of these things answered, your owners and you will have a de facto partnership, and every goofy thing those other owners do puts your wealth in play. Is that what you want? You want to be liable every time your fellow owners are driving their car around? Of course not.
Laura, I have a story to share with you on that one.
Yes, sir.
The reason we encourage our clients and friends to avoid partnerships is that in a partnership, each person in that partnership is 100% liable for the liabilities of the partnership. And so some of the tools are corporations and LLCs, et cetera. And those LLCs and corporations have personal protection for liability. But you have to be careful. In Texas, a partnership doesn't have to be in writing. If you're going into business with your friends, if you're loaning one of your family members some money, be sure to put that in a note, promissory note, and don't make it payable out of the profits. Because if you have a business that's payable out of the profits, you're considered a partner. And I had an insurance agent who loaned money to his neighbor to buy some inventory for the water filters when they were being sold 10 or 15, 20 years ago. It was multi-level marketing. he loaned money, and the agreement was his money was going to be paid back out of profits of the sales of the filters. And he became personally liable when the gentleman, his neighbor, was delivering water filters and had a collision with in an intersection. And because the neighbor had loaned him money, he was paying out of the profits, he was considered a partner, and he was also held liable. So just don't avoid partnerships as much as you can. That's exactly what's on the screen right now. Avoid them. They don't have to be in writing. And a good way to avoid them is to get a note instead of an agreement, and get good operating agreements. And that's what I know Ms. Fowler's getting ready to discuss next. I just wanted to share that with you. Not even knowing you're in a partnership, you can be in a partnership.
That's good, Terry. And here's how do Terry and Laura make lots and lots of money. I know that's what everybody out there this afternoon wants to do, is spend all their money on Terry and Laura. Well, here's the lawyer's antidote, my friends. And it is, you know, and when people say, aren't you concerned about the future of lawyers and LegalZoom.com? Heck no. Do you have any idea how much money we make a year later when somebody has succeeded and they realize this is all goofed up? You did get a filing. You did get an assumed name. You got exactly what you told them. But what you didn't get is somebody who would take the time to force you to think. Terry and I are not in charge of the answers. We're in charge of the questions. So the things about legal names, registered agents, and oh, and by the way, Teresa, if I may, they've all got our contact information. If you have any question because you watched this and we didn't get to it, you may call Mr. Belt. If you want somebody to be nice to you, call Mr. Belt. And if you want somebody to be nice to you, call me. But seriously, we will answer any of these questions about what you need to do. But here is the whole thing. Let me also say, as we go through these links, I encourage people before they spend any money on us, go to these state agency websites. They're excellent. They're not written for lawyers. They're written for real people. And here are two of the links. So you go to these, you read these, and you will likely understand more than a lot of lawyers about filings and what you should pick. And, you know, when people say, Laura, what's your favorite business? I say, that's the most ridiculous question you've ever asked me. What are you trying to do here? You know, you're going to have foreign investors. Are you going to own land? Are you going to have a parent corporation? What are you trying to do? And that's what you've got to sit down and think through what you're going to do and who you're going to do it with. And then you'll know what to do and you get a little guidance from the lawyers. All right. This is a biggie. I don't care what anybody tells you about how wonderful LLCs are. An LLC may not pay its owners W-2 income. Repeat after me. An LLC may not pay its owners W-2 income. Now, will ADP, your accountant will probably give you a tongue lashing, but ADP will pay anything to the federal government that you tell them to pay. But when and if the IRS spots that an LLC has paid W-2 income to an owner, not to employees, but to an owner, it is going to come after you and you're going to owe, I mean, you're not going to go to jail, but you're going to owe substantial penalties. So don't do that. Read these sites. And if you want to pay yourself income, you need to be sure and make an election to be taxed as a corporation. Now, you may call this thing limited liability company. That's a name that the Secretary of State has. And you may call this thing a corporation. And then when you go over to get your EIN with the IRS, that's a federal designation. At that point, it gives you choices. Now, I always tell people, you got the drive-through at McDonald's, that's the Secretary of State. And then you got the IRS, that's like the buffet at Luby's. Now that they're shutting down all the buffets at Luby's, I got to go pick some new stories, Teresa. But seriously, they have nothing in common. And when you go over there to the IRS, you're going to have to elect how you want to be taxed. And it's very confusing. And that's where you need to get your CPA or a lawyer to tell you how to be taxed. Well, I don't know how you should be taxed. You got to tell me what you're trying to do. Are you going to buy land? Are you going to have employees? You want to pay yourself as an owner W-2 income? So you got to think. You know, the answers are with you. The questions are for a skilled advisor. And that's where I see people screwing up, because this is, you know, handing you one of these entities like LegalZoom does is like handing you a revolver and not insisting you go out to the firing range and figure out how to use it. You can screw up your credit and put yourself in harm's way for interest and penalties big time with the IRS if you don't know what you're doing, because these entities are not one size fits all. Okay, now this one. Summer nephew wants a part-time job and your sister is driving you crazy. Whether you have one half of one employee or you have 100 employees, you need to never, now this is strong talk, but I'll just tell you right now, I wouldn't have an employee if I didn't have funds sufficient to be a participating employer in workers' compensation, because it caps liability. If you tell nephew, okay, nephew, take this bag of money over to the bank. Okay, nephew, take these documents over to the title company. Okay, nephew, go buy some lumber. We got a job. We got to start working in the morning. And nephew takes his personal car and in the scope and course of your entity's mission is driving around because it's so exciting to do his aunt's bidding and gets in a wreck. And, you know, he's young people are much more expensive. Hey, did I ever tell you the story about the old man and he walked onto the Naval Ordnance Range and he was collecting bits of copper and aluminum and precious metals, and he blew up himself because he was trying to pry out copper for scrap to sell. The old boy blew himself up and his family sued the Navy, but he was so old, he was like 98 years old. Sucking up aluminum and cyanide must preserve you. And we could prove to the family that he owed us money because he was so much older than the median age, which was at about 84 for men. So, but you get one of those young ones injured, they're gonna be, a young one earning 30,000 a year is actually gonna cost you a lot more if they were injured in scope and course, if you're not a participating employer. But if you have somebody like the neurosurgeon who's 62 years old and they get run over. But don't wait to find out these fascinating mathematics. I guess we ought to just hire everybody who's 90, and then we can tell the family they've outlived their statistical norm, so the family owes us money. Yeah, we did settle for a small amount, by the way, but seriously, don't go down the workers' comp path. Now, I'm not talking about owners. And owners don't fall under this even if they're paying themselves W-2 income. I'm talking about true W-2 employees, part-time, full-time. If they're injured in the scope and course of your bidding, doing your work, you are liable for their injuries. And, you know, if it's some third party, you're only liable if you're negligence, but Texas is so adamant about employers participating in this system so the worker has some recourse that you're robbed of most of your defenses. If it's third party negligence, you have defenses. If it's an employee, you're robbed of most of your defenses. Mr. Bell.
Laura, I have something to share with you on that. I was in a jury trial down in Bastrop where a convenience store was sued because the employee, in carrying out more boxes than she could see over, was walking out to the dumpster and tripped over a guide wire from electrical pole and hurt herself. And he didn't have workers' comp. And folks, workers' comp is very inexpensive. It's just pennies, fractions of pennies on a dollar. It's very inexpensive. But with everybody paying into the system, Texas has a great unemployment system. But if you don't have unemployment insurance and your employee gets hurt, the only defense that you would have is that the injury was self-inflicted.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. I had a client that cut off the tip of her finger making a salad for a restaurant. That wasn't self-inflicted. I mean, she did it to herself. She didn't do it on purpose. The lady carrying out the boxes wouldn't have tripped over the wire. She may not have been clever by stacking boxes above where she could see, but she tripped over the wire. Not only did the guy not have insurance, he didn't show up for the trial. I'm sitting there by myself at the table arguing to 12 good members of the Bastrop community that this lady walked out there and knew the wire was there because she'd worked so many months. And she knew it was there and she tripped over it on purpose. Well, the jury went, Belt, get out of here. Your argument isn't going to work, buddy. Your man should have paid the few dollars to get
An A plus for effort on that one, Mr. Belt. Okay, moving right along here because we're almost to Q&A time.
Okay,
Harry, you get to answer all the Q&As, okay? But
I'll do the best I can.
here's how you get one. There's no magic to an EIN. You don't need to go to LegalZoom.com. You don't need to transfer your sensitive information all over the place. Just go to the IRS portal, which is secure, and get your EIN. I mean, if you can type numbers into a portal, an electronic portal, it'll take you about 5 minutes. And I also urge you, again, if you have an employee, you don't want to be using your social security number. You want to go to these websites and get an EIN. Okay, now we could talk, Teresa, maybe you invite us back again and we'll have all this fun. But operating agreements that Mr. Internet drafted are not going to work because and if they say, Laura, send me the one you think is best, I say, are you just out of your minds?
Yeah.
What do you want to do is what's best. And we guide people through these questions. I always tell them, they say, well, how much is that going to cost? And I say, if you people can make a decision, almost nothing, and I'll throw in lunch. But if you're going to sit at my conference room table and scream at each other for 4 hours because you never thought about these things before, it's going to cost you a lot. So here are the questions. You know, this is kind of fun. You can find out a very different side of your spouse when you start asking those questions about money. Okay, here's my favorite way to raise money. It's simpler and there is no paper trail. But if you're not going to hold up Wells Fargo with a 6-shooter, I love 6-shooters, by the way. How the West was won with a 6-shooter, Smith & Wesson, Colt 45, which originally was a 6-shooter, right, Terry? It's now known more as a revolvers aren't really what people talk about anymore, but okay. These are links. Do not perform neurosurgery on yourself. Make sure you know what you're doing if you're taking other people's money. And the rules for raising, you know, these funding mechanisms like GoFundMe, they're legal, but they do have regulations. And one of the biggest lawsuits we've seen, this was not actually Texas, but the principle is the same, are those people that raised, I thought they were going to raise, probably thought they were going to raise a few $1,000s, and they raised $180,000 for a homeless man. But then it turned out the homeless man didn't need the money, but he didn't say anything until the people who raised it didn't give him the money. And he went straight to the Attorney General. And those people, my understanding is they did spend time briefly in the penitentiary, not for GoFundMe raising, but for fraudulently misrepresenting the public what they used it for. So I think that, you know, a bank will never let you do that. And I think GoFundMe is another one that's like handing people a revolver and not telling them how to use it. So if you're going to try and take other people's money, perfectly legal, but go read these sections. Okay, now, once you get the money, you've got to have a CPA or somebody who knows what they're doing telling you how to book the money. If you don't book, a loan is not a gift, is not a contribution. And if you take all this money, GoFundMe money, you have $180,000 worth of income. You may have thought it was a gift, it's income. And if you go out and spend it and you've then got $25,000 worth of tax liability, where's that coming from? So you need to get some CPAs to advise you before you get the money, because the minute the money hits your bank account, you got a problem. All right, names. This is where everybody goes nuts. A name of a business is to the first, like, you know, by the time you file the 5th or the 6th business, it's like, whatever. It's like, I understand people with 5 children, by the 5th child, whatever. But you know, that first one, people just really get engrossed in the name. The name means nothing anymore. When I was a young lawyer, Terry was a young lawyer, it mattered. But today, everything, and I picked out GoDaddy, but there are lots of providers of, until you got a domain name that you think is memorable, and until that is available, something similar to that domain name is available at US Patent and Trademark, you have nothing, because those are national, in the case of a domain name, international pathways to marketing, and they're a lot more important. With Secretary of State, the dirty little secret, Secretary of State aggressively polices your legal name, not your human being legal name, your business legal name. Once you get it, like Terry Belt LLC, that's Belt's pretty unusual name. Terry's going to get that if he filed it. Well, they're going to give him that. And then if Terry wants to name it GoDaddy.com, well, he's not going to be able to do that because that's a registered mark. But the Secretary of State doesn't police your assumed names at all. So, and this is a radical shift in my life, in my professional life. I tell everyone, I do this myself, I own other businesses, is go to the domain name, then go, it doesn't cost anything, and it's kind of a fun website, US Patent and Trademark there. See if those names are there, and don't worry about the Secretary of State. Just come up with some name, and then you can file a DBA that tracks all the way back to your registered mark and your domain name. If you don't have a business entity, then you go to the Secretary of State for county, and you file in the counties where you're doing business. But that gets complicated in a hurry and expensive. Texas has 254 counties, and I don't even know anymore with the internet where people are doing business. Where is a realtor doing business? Where's somebody who drives their food truck around, but the kitchen is in the next state doing business? I don't know. So having a statewide entitlement, which you can't have that unless you have a business entity, or you can't affordably have it. Okay, we're getting almost to the end here because Q&A. All right, if you don't have these things, back to the operating agreement one more time. Terry, why don't we just have as the finale here, and then Teresa, I'm going to suggest we let people ask questions the rest of the time. Say something about operating agreements and people, Big Daddy and Big Mama dying, or masters of the universe who are invincible but do drive the car down the highway every day.
I believe in the operating agreements, there should be discussions about work duties and responsibilities. Because if we're just doing this with money invested and you don't have any responsibility, you can change and move out of state or do whatever you want to do. But if you have an operating agreement that says, you're getting 49% of the business and your duties are full-time this, full-time that, full-time that, then you have them tied to not leaving. If there's no vacation rules, if there's no work and duty rules, your operating agreement is not going to bind anybody to stay there and work it. So I'd say get good advice on how to draw an operating agreement that does what you want it to. And as you cautioned earlier, Ms. Fowler, do not use a cookie cutter prepared operating agreement. It needs to be designed specifically for you.
And thank you, Terry. And as our last treasure, with people, Big Daddy and Big Mama, who have never thought they could ever possibly become incompetent or die. They're now 82 years old, and they still haven't thought about who's going to succeed if this business continues and it's a successful business, which we get all the time. If you think it's just young people who you can't get their attention, believe me, it is not. It's everyone. Nobody wants to think about their own mortality. So Terry, what do you suggest in the way of a succession plan built into the operating agreement?
Well, I like to detail the amount of work and duties that the person in the operating agreement that's covered by the operating agreement is going to do, how much money they're going to invest, what they're going to do to keep it, and what their percentages are. And Laura, when we're talking about percentages, I wanted to share with your audience, instead of giving away percentages of your business, you can assign percentages of your profits. You can say, 12% or 15 or 20%, whatever. And that way, when we send out notices to the members of the companies, we don't have to send out 1,000 notices. We just send out the notices to the shareholder. If it's just one or two shareholders, it makes it easier, our members. And so if you're going to be working it, you ought to have detailed roadmap of what you're doing and what the other people are doing. And what the other people are doing is important. You have them for partners, you might as well make sure they're doing what they say they're going to do and have an outline of what you expect. That's my advice.
Yeah, and that again, what Terry just said, that is not cookie cutter stuff. It's what's fair in light of what kind of contributions these people have made and their individual concerns about providing for their family and who actually is out there that knows how to run this business. And that changes over time. So, okay, we're not going to talk about insurance because we're out of time. If anyone wants to talk about insurance, I will talk about insurance all day long. I teach a whole course on property casualty insurance because I'm licensed by Texas Department of Insurance. I'd rather set my toenails on fire than listen to myself give that course. It's so boring, but it's important. And then last, and much of the funding for Austin Up, aging, everybody's doing it, does come from the city of Austin. And Teresa is eyewitness to how they really want to help you with businesses. And this our aging initiative, it's impressive. But right now we don't have an age designator for historically underutilized business. We do have ethnicities and we don't have an LGBT, even though that those who identify out LGBTQ in the Austin area are now believed to be a bigger affinity group than Asians, who I believe are about 9%, and Blacks, who I believe are African Americans, who are about 8%. So, but neither one of those has a designation. Women and the traditional ethnicities and races do have those designations, and they're very valuable. I'm going to brag a little before we start letting you ask questions. I am proud of the fact that I've taken certain business owners who came to this country. They're hardworking, they're smart, they barely speak English. And some of these are single moms just trying to get food on the table. And their hard work in the right kind of industry, construction, cleaning, maintenance, they got these designations. And 5 years later, they're back. They're whining and screaming, Laura, because the city is a wealth cap. I'm a millionaire on paper. They're gonna debar me. I can't keep my designation anymore. And we have solutions for that, which I won't share with you on this because I want to get in trouble. But yeah, but anyway, think about that, because a lot of people, there's no designation for being disabled. There is a designation for being a disabled, for being a veteran. There are designations for being disabled and for being a disabled veteran, and they're very, very valuable. Okay, there we are. Aren't we attractive? Yoo-hoo! All right. Let's have some questions, Teresa.
All right, Laura, thank you. We had one question. Let's see. Can you file taxes for LLCs as married filing jointly with a spouse?
Okay, that question is wrong. Bad question. If you want somebody to say something nice to you, ask Terry, but and that is a frequent, really smart people we represent. Combine what you just said. It doesn't work that way. So back to the drive-through at McDonald's and the Luby's buffet. First, we go to the Secretary of State. There is a drop-down menu. If you want something else, that's just tough. You've got to pick from the Secretary of State, where it has certificate of formation. You have to pick what you want, and that's all you get. That's all Texas has to offer. Interestingly enough, this new public benefit corporation, which I personally think, and if you see the Secretary of State, you can tell her I think is a bunch of nonsense. But this PBC thing, which we don't even know what it means yet, but it's so new. It was adopted in 2019. It's still not up there. A PBC doesn't exist yet. So you got, at the Secretary of State, you got a corporation, you got a limited liability company, you got a nonprofit organization. And that's pretty much it. You got a limited partnership. That's it. All right. Now, that has nothing to do with what kind of return you file. when you go to the IRS, probably because you wanted an EIN, an employer identification number, which you should get even if you don't tend to have any employees, because that's what you have to use if you have a business entity to file a return. The first time you go there, you need from forevermore, after you heard Laura Fowler, when you push that button for your EIN, you need to push that like you were reaching your hand into a rattlesnake nest. Because at that point, the IRS is going to give you some choices. And they're not entities. They are choices about how you want to be taxed. And you pick one. You want to be taxed as a partnership. You want to be taxed as a subchapter S. You want to be taxed as a C corporation. Now, you don't see any of those words over at the Secretary of State. They're only in the rattlesnake nest. And guess what? If you stick your hand in that rattlesnake's nest, it's sticking there for 5 years. You don't get to change again. And if that isn't what you wanted, you tell your accountant, they say, well, that's okay, we'll form you another one. No problem. Make a new tax election. But guess what? If all your assets are in the first, the one you made the mistake because you pushed down in the rattlesnake's nest when you didn't know what you were doing, you won't have major tax consequences, because every time you transfer your assets out of one entity and into another one, this new one you formed, that's a taxable event. And in a community like Austin, I don't know about you, but all my friends come whining down here. They just got their, my gosh, you want to have a religious experience? You see what the tax assessor collector sent us for this year. And, they say, Laura, I want to say this, Teresa, even though that isn't exactly about business formation. They called me and said, Laura, this is an outrage. They're saying my house is worth $50,000 more than last year. And I say, yeah. Well, you want me to go down there? Let me tell you the dirty little secret. If you challenge those taxes, and I don't care what anybody says, most people are losing these ad valorem tax battle. I got a tax assessor collector challenger, and we go down there and we're losing. I know how to challenge it, but I go get someone who knows what they're doing. They're a buffer, because if you go down there and challenge your taxes, and you may have land in a business entity that's not got homestead caps on it, this isn't that big a deal if it's got a homestead cap, you've declared it as homestead. You do this for commercial or raw land or your little rent house, the tax assessor collector over there, when you challenge their appraisal, they have the right to look at it and then say, you know what, Teresa, you're right. That property you just challenged, your little rent house, it's not worth $250,000. It's worth $350,000. And based on the tax code, I'm taking it up, girl. And they have the absolute right to do that. And I am seeing them do it too much yet. But I'm telling you, with all the money that got spent and also didn't get collected during COVID, because, there's basically been a moratorium on evicting anybody because they haven't paid their taxes. That's going to lift, my friends, on May the 1st. So I encourage you not to go over there and fight your taxes unless you got some pretty strong evidence in your court. Not what you think, not what your realtor pulled in comparables, but some serious appraisal experts to go over there and battle back against it. And figure out also, what's it going to amount to? Because all that money you spend on people like me and appraisal experts, it's only good for 1 year, and then all starts over again. So, sorry to get off the track there, but remember that rattlesnake pit, okay? 5 years.
We've got some more questions. Here's another one. Can an S Corp pay owners as W-2 employees?
Yes, that's the best choice. Now, remember, you only form a corporation at the Secretary of State, the Texas Secretary of State. Then when you go over there to get your employer number and you stick your hand down in that rattlesnake pit, the drop-down list is going to say, do you want to be an S Corp? Do you want to be a C Corp? Do you want to be a partnership? And it has nothing to do with what your Texas thing is called. And at that point, based on what you want to do, you make an election. But a C Corp or an S Corp are perfectly appropriate to pay people as employees. But the biggie that I was talking about now is not about W-2 employees. It's when you, as an owner, want to pay yourself W-2 income. And lots of owners, if their company has some cash flow, that's exactly what they want to do. They may pay themselves a distribution. You think of it as a bonus, but what it is a capital distribution. But they may also say, I'm setting myself a salary, and they do it because they want to participate in the employee benefit plan. They want to get the same benefits as the employees. But for those, you need to use a corp. You need to elect to be taxed as a C Corp or an S Corp and not as a limited liability company.
Okay, another question. Can owners who are paid through W-2s collect unemployment?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know that one either, Laura. I think the answer is yes, probably, but it would take a little more research. I don't know for sure.
And here's why. We had a lot of single member entities this time that they were paying themselves as you know, they call them gig workers, and they're really what they are. You call them gig workers, but what they really are is self-employed. And they absolutely had the right to claim. And many 1099 contractors who were doing a booming business had the right to claim. Can we send everybody a follow-up email though, rather than Laura and Terry speculating on it? That's a good question.
Yeah, if Teresa, if you'll send me who asked the question, I'll get the answer and reply to them.
Yeah, we'll send it back through Teresa, and we'll
connect me,
Sure.
and I'll connect you to the person. Okay, here's another question. If you have recently, let's see, if you need to revise capital stock and land transaction, how do you go about it?
Okay, well, capital stock is something that is governed by your bylaws or governance agreements. Land transaction, I don't know what you mean. I mean, what do you?
I would put it in minutes.
And then what? So, capital stock, and then what are you talking about with capital stock? You talking about giving some away, changing the voting rights? Whatever your operating agreement or in a corporation is typically called bylaws. Whatever they say right now about voting rights, whatever they say about changing it, you got to get those people together if you want to change it. Now about land, I don't understand that question.
Okay, and if the person who asked that question, if you want to unmute yourself and ask it or explain more, that'd be great.
They're scared, I'll yell at them, Teresa.
Well, another one came up, and I think you've covered this, but how do the owners pay themselves within an LLC?
They don't. Well, painfully, because when the IRS finds out about that one, they're going to bite you. But again, you can form an LLC, and that's what you tell the Secretary of State you want. And then you can go over to the IRS, the rattlesnake nest, and you push down and you elect what you want to be taxed as. And you can be taxed as a S Corp or a C Corp. Now, you may have to reconfigure some things internally to do that. But these two entities, the Secretary of State, which is a state agency, and the IRS, which is a federal agency, they don't talk to each other. They don't care what one does or the other does. I mean, their data is shared to figure out if you're cheating them out of something, but they just don't care. It's like zebras and giraffes. They rarely mate.
All right. The person, let's see.
That's a good question. That's an important question that lots of smart people make that mistake.
Yes.
And going back to explain about the capital stock, the initial amount was incorrectly entered by a lawyer for both capital stock and land transferred from private to company.
Okay, well, that's a problem. How good is that lawyer's malpractice insurance? Because that's bad. But
I'd refile the fundamental papers and put them in right. And as Laura said, if there's a cost to that, invite the gentleman who did it wrong to share in that cost.
Yeah. Yeah, because if one of them says, well, wait a minute, I like the new deal better than the one you're saying we agreed to, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, let me say this. All things flow comfortably to those who had CPAs, because a CPA, and the problem with that is people get these K1s, they know what they are. They just say, where do I sign? And they write a check. unfortunately, CPAs are the most you think we're misunderstood and nobody listens to us? At least we're entertaining. Those poor old CPAs, nobody listens to them. They're all speaking Hebrew and they're speaking Greek, but CPAs, I always say when it's a mangled mess, like an operating agreement that they say, I know we have a new one, but we didn't know what we did. You need to go there to the IRS, to the CPA and say, how have you been filing this for these owners? What are you showing their sharing ratios to be? And that's going to be a pretty good indicator of how the ownership is. And then if people say, well, that's not what we intended, then you got to get the people on the bylaws or the operating agreement where it defines the owners together. And a majority of them are going to have to vote to change it. And a majority of them are going to have to vote for contribution if the way it was misworded resulted in unfairness or a greater tax liability for someone than what was really supposed to be. And if you have that problem, you come see Terry and me, and we will spend all your money on that one, because that's a great big mess. It gets back to what Terry said over and over again, so did I. Don't sign these things until you know what they say about ownership.
All right.
Or units.
So we have time for one more question. And just to clarify, somebody said, if you start out taking an owner's draw and in 2 years you decided you want or need to be an S Corp, you can't make that election for S Corp until 5 years? You have to wait
No.
for 5 years?
You can make it right away, but once you make it, you have to wait 5 years to reverse it. In other words, you start off at this position and you want to change it to a new position. You can do that. But once you change it to the new position, let's say you start out as a regular corporation, you want to change it to an S Corp, you got to wait 5 years to refile it.
Right. And remember that it's not what Terry just said. That's exactly right. But Terry's not talking about entities. The stuff at the IRS has nothing to do with business entities. It's a tax election. So
You got to wait 5 years in between your tax elections, Teresa.
All righty. Okay, y'all, let's go ahead and wrap up. And yes, to answer your questions, we will be sending out a link to the recording, the slides, a copy of the slides, and that question that you're going to research and
workers' comp or
yeah,
Right.
Other people want to know that the answer to, so I'll send that out to everyone as well.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Terry.
It was a pleasure to be with you.
So good. Thank you very much for this information, and thank everyone for attending. You can find out more about our other programs at our website, austinup.org. And look forward to seeing you again.
Go Age! Thanks, Teresa. Go forth and prosper.
What's our motto, Laura? Aging. Everyone's doing it.
Yay! That's trademark. That's trademarked. See ya.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Laura.